I woke up from surgery to a nurse asking if I needed anything, and all I could think about was the text on my phone. 7 days, a balcony suite, $14,300, charged to my card while I was under anesthesia. My husband told everyone I was at work. If you enjoy stories like this, hit subscribe, because what I found when I got home broke something in me that never went back together the same way. My name is Diane, I'm 44, and I've spent 19 years married to a man named Craig. My younger brother Tom was the one constant good thing in my family, steady, honest, the kind of person who called every Sunday just to check in, no agenda, just love. Craig, when I met him at 25, seemed like the answer to every quiet prayer I'd made about wanting a partner who felt like home. Charming at dinner parties, attentive in a room full of strangers, generous with compliments in front of my parents. My college roommate Sasha met him once before the wedding and pulled me aside at the rehearsal dinner. "He talks about you like you're an asset, not a person," she said. I told her she'd had too much wine. That was my first mistake, mistaking her clarity for cynicism. The first several years were, by most measures, good. We built a life, a house in Colorado, 2 kids, a marketing business I ran from home that grew steadily enough to become the actual financial backbone of our household by year 8. Craig worked in sales, inconsistent commissions, long stretches between deals. I never made an issue of it. I loved him, and love, I told myself, doesn't count dollars. The shift was slow, the way it always is. It started with comments about my spending. Ironic, since I earned more than he did. "You bought new curtains without asking me?" Then it became access. He insisted on being the primary on every account for simplicity, including the business account I'd built from nothing. Then it became control disguised as partnership. Every major purchase needed his approval, but his purchases needed no one's. I let it happen gradually enough that I never noticed the floor disappearing beneath me until I was already standing on nothing. Isolation crept in through his family, not mine. My mother-in-law, Pamela, and Craig's 2 sisters, Renee and Kathy, absorbed themselves fully into our lives over the years. Holidays at our house, family trips that I quietly paid for, constant visits that always seemed to happen when I was busiest with work deadlines. They were warm to my face, and, I'd learn later, something else entirely behind it. My own friendships thinned as Craig discouraged unnecessary distractions from what he called our family unit, and slowly my world shrank down to just them. The first major incident happened 4 years ago. I discovered, buried in a business account statement, a $6,000 withdrawal I hadn't authorized. Craig had used company funds to cover a family ski trip he'd booked for his mother and sisters. When I confronted him, he flipped the conversation entirely. "You're so obsessed with money, Diane. Family matters more than your spreadsheets." I ended up apologizing for how I'd raised it. The calm after that lasted almost 2 months. Each incident after that shortened the peace. 6 weeks, then 3, then barely 10 days before the next quiet betrayal surfaced. By this year, the pattern was constant, but I'd grown so used to swallowing it that I barely registered new violations as they happened. Then, in March, I was diagnosed with a condition requiring emergency gallbladder surgery, followed by a 5-day hospital stay due to complications. I remember the fear in that pre-op room, Craig squeezing my hand, telling me he'd handle everything while I recovered. I believed him completely. That was my last mistake of that particular kind. The ticking clock arrived in the form of my brother Tom. He'd been traveling for work and was due to land back in Colorado the exact same week I was hospitalized, planning to visit me the moment he touched down. Craig didn't know Tom's flight had been moved up 2 days early due to a canceled connection. That accident of scheduling is the only reason any of this came to light when it did. The turning point happened on day 3 of my hospital stay. I was scrolling through my banking app from my hospital bed, mostly out of boredom, checking that our mortgage autopay had gone through, when a pending charge caught my eye. $14,300 to a cruise line I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped straight through the mattress. I called Craig immediately. He answered breezy, background noise loud and strange, clinking glasses, distant music, nothing that sounded like our quiet house. "Oh, that? Don't worry about it. It's a work thing. I'll explain later," he said, and hung up before I could ask another question. Something in his voice was wrong. Too light. Too rehearsed. I called Tom, my hands trembling against the hospital blanket. He was already at baggage claim, 2 days ahead of schedule, and something about the tone of my voice made him skip his own house entirely and drive straight to mine instead. What he found stopped him cold in our driveway. Our house dark, mail piling up, and on our shared family group chat, the one I'd been too sedated and sick to check closely, dozens of unread photos. Pamela in a sun hat by a ship's railing, Renee holding a cocktail with a little umbrella, Kathy captioning a photo, "Best week ever," and Craig, my husband, grinning in a photo taken from the deck of a cruise ship, time-stamped the exact day I'd been wheeled into surgery. Tom sat in his car outside my empty house and started screenshotting everything before a single photo could disappear. He called me that night, voice shaking with a fury I'd never heard from my gentle, steady brother. "Diane, he's on a cruise, right now, with his whole family, while you're in a hospital bed." I remember staring at the ceiling tile above my hospital bed, feeling something crack open inside my chest that had nothing to do with my surgical incision. Tom didn't wait for me to process it before he acted. He drove straight to my business bank the next morning with the documentation I kept at home. LLC paperwork, our marriage's financial history, everything proving the account Craig had drained was fundamentally tied to my business, not a joint household fund he had unrestricted rights to. The bank flagged the transaction as unauthorized business fund usage pending my review, freezing further activity on the card. Tom also quietly reached out to a family law attorney recommended by a coworker, laying out everything, the years of financial control, the isolation, and now this. I endured one more incident before the confrontation, a call from Craig on day 4, annoyed that his card had stopped working mid-cruise. "Did you do something to the account? This is embarrassing, Diane. We're at the captain's dinner." Embarrassing. My husband, drinking champagne on a ship funded by my business while I lay in a hospital bed recovering from surgery, was worried about being embarrassed. I hung up without a word and handed my phone to Tom. When Craig and his family finally returned 5 days later, tanned and cheerful, dragging suitcases through our front door, I was home from the hospital, still moving slowly, sitting at our kitchen table with Tom beside me and a folder of documents between us. The bank's unauthorized transaction notice, the itemized cruise charges, screenshots of every photo, and a letter from the attorney outlining the beginning of divorce proceedings, along with a formal demand for restitution of business funds. Pamela's smile faltered first, then Renee's. Craig just stood in the doorway, sunburned and stunned, realizing there was no version of "it's a work thing" that could talk his way out of a folder that thick. "You used my business account to fund a vacation while I was on an operating table," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "You told everyone I was at work. I nearly died on a table, Craig, and you were toasting champagne." He tried the old script. "You're overreacting. Family deserves nice things too." But it landed on nothing this time. The bank had already flagged the charges as fraudulent business use. The lawyer had already filed. Tom had already told my parents, who, upon seeing the photos, cut contact with Craig entirely within the week. The consequences arrived fast and total. The divorce was finalized within 8 months, with the court ordering full restitution of the $14,300, plus additional damages for the unauthorized business withdrawal, on top of a settlement that recognized my business as separately owned property built almost entirely through my own labor. Craig lost access to the company account permanently. His mother and sisters, who I later learned had planned the trip together for months behind my back, lost their place in my life completely. No more holidays, no more visits, No more warm smiles hiding cold calculations. Recovery took longer than the surgery itself. I rebuilt my business, doubled down on the client relationships I'd nearly let slip through my fingers during years of shrinking myself smaller to keep peace. Tom moved 20 minutes from my new house, insisting he wanted to actually be useful this time, and became the person I call first for everything now. Not because I need saving, but because real family shows up in hospital rooms, not cruise ship photos. It's been 10 months since that hospital bed and that banking app notification. My incision has healed. The betrayal took longer, but it's healing too.